Hello, I'm Rachel Scarrett, class of 95 and BLS head of school. I'd like to welcome students, faculty, staff, family, alumni, and friends to Prize Declamation 2021. Public declamation has a long and rich history here at the Latin School. A part of the earliest classical curriculum in the colonial days, the tradition was lost over time and then revived in the mid-1800s and has been here with us in place ever since. Traditionally, 4 times each year, students compete to earn a place in public declamation, where they declaim before their peers in this auditorium. The year culminates with prize declamation in the spring. Due to the global pandemic and remote learning, we hosted 3 virtual declamation performances over the course of this school year that were pre-recorded and streamed to the BLS community. Although we're saddened that we cannot come together in our usual fashion for reunion weekend to celebrate and honor this prize declamation tradition with all the pomp and circumstance associated with welcoming the return of our alumni from our 25th and 50th reunion classes, we have found a way to uphold the tradition in a new way. This prize declamation has also been pre-recorded. A small set of actively involved alumni, who themselves were declaimers as students at Boston Latin, have volunteered to judge the performances remotely. You are about to be entertained, inspired, educated, and moved by our declaimers today. From the 3 public declamation assemblies during the year, these 9 students were our top scorers, and today they'll be competing for prizes and honors. They are excellent examples of what declamation is all about, and I know that you will enjoy their performances. We will start with our student in Class 5 and proceed through the grade levels, concluding with our students in Class 1. Declamation is a difficult task. The selection of a piece, the memorization, preparation, the practice, the courage one must call on to get up and present to the best ability the thoughts, words, and feelings of great writers. For us, the audience, declamation requires our attention and participation in this event by listening, understanding, and feeling with the declaimers. Given this remote environment, I encourage you to find a creative way to show appreciation to the 9 participants for their efforts. I am inspired by these orators and thankful that we have been able to come together in this way. I'm also looking forward to an in-person return to prize declamation tradition next year. In the meantime, thank you for watching.
Hello, my name is Eileen Shaw and I'm from Class 5. Today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's commencement speech to the class of 2015 at Wellesley College, a women's college. In her speech, Adichie talks about the prevalence of gender inequality in the world and advises her audience to take action against it. She also urges her audience to challenge societal norms about women. As I declaim, think of how you can promote gender equality around you as well. And now an excerpt from Adichie's commencement speech. I already knew that the world does not extend to women the many small courtesies that it extends to men. I also knew that victimhood is not a virtue, that being discriminated against does not make you somehow morally better. And I knew that men were not inherently bad or evil. They were merely privileged. And I knew that privilege blinds because it is the nature of privilege to blind. And you, because you now have your beautiful degree, have become privileged no matter what your background. That degree and the experience of being here is a privilege. Don't let it blind you too often. Sometimes you will need to push it aside in order to see clearly. This school will open doors for you. Walk through those doors and make your strides long and firm and sure. Write television shows in which female strength is not depicted as remarkable, but merely normal. Teach your students to see that vulnerability is a human rather than a female trait. Hire more women where there are few. But remember that a woman you hire doesn't have to be exceptionally good. Like a majority of the men who get hired, she just needs to be good enough. And finally, I would like to end with the final note on the most important thing in the world: love. Now, girls are often raised to see love only as giving. Women are praised for their love when that love is an act of giving. But to love is to give and to take. Please love by giving and by taking. Give and be given. If you are only giving and not taking, you'll know. You'll know from that small and true voice inside you that we females are so often socialized to silence. Don't silence that voice. Dare to take. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessie Wong, and today I will declaim Of History and Hope by Miller Williams. This piece was read at President Bill Clinton's second inauguration in 1997. It describes some prevalent American concerns and warnings to the younger generation, along with what our duty is to our children and youth to establish a better land only they can see. Williams uses day-to-day issues to describe the ideals a nation should strive for. While you listen to this piece, I ask you to ponder what values belong in our legacy and what we can do to preserve the American dream for our children. Once again, this is Miller Williams of History and Hope. We have memorized America, how it was born and who we have been and where. In ceremonies and silence, we say the words, telling the stories, singing the old songs. We like the places they take us. Mostly, we do. The great and all the anonymous dead are there. We know the sound of all the sounds we brought. The rich taste of it is on our tongues. But where are we going to be, and why, and who the disenfranchised dead want to know? We mean to be the people we meant to be, to keep on going where we meant to go. But how do we fashion the future? Who can say how except in the minds of those who will call it now? The children. The children. And how does our garden grow with waving hands, oh rarely in a row, and flowering faces, and brambles that we can no longer allow? Who are many people coming together cannot become one people falling apart. Who dreamed for every child an even chance cannot let luck alone turn doorknobs or not. Whose law was never so much of the hand as the head cannot let chaos make its way to the heart. Who have seen learning struggle from teacher to child cannot let ignorance spread itself like rot. We know what we have done and what we have said and how we have grown degree by slow degree, believing ourselves toward all we have tried to become. Just and compassionate, equal, able, and free. All this in the hands of children, eyes already set on a land we never can visit. It isn't there yet. But looking through their eyes, we can see what our long gift to them may come to be. If we can truly remember, they will not forget. Thank you. Hello, my name is Mirabelle Berman Reinhardt. In 2010, Michelle Alexander published her book, The New Jim Crow, after the election of President Barack Obama and our supposed triumph over race. She explores the war on drugs and how it led to millions of African Americans incarcerated and denied the very rights supposedly won in the civil rights movement. In this excerpt, she tells the story of one of many African American women whose life was destroyed by the war on drugs. There's a misconception that our criminal justice system is colorblind, but Alexander punctures this myth and places mass incarceration at the forefront of the movement for racial justice in America. Now, an excerpt from The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Imagine you are Emma Faye Stewart, a 30-year-old, single, African-American mother of two who was arrested as part of a drug sweep in Hearne, Texas. All but one of the people arrested were African-American. You are innocent. After almost a month in jail, you decide to plead guilty so you can return home to your children. Unwilling to risk a trial and years of imprisonment, you are sentenced to 10 years probation in order to pay $1,000 in fines, as well as court and probation costs. You are also now branded a drug felon. You are no longer eligible for food stamps. You may be discriminated against in employment. You cannot vote for at least 12 years, and you are about to be evicted from public housing. Once homeless, your children will be taken away from you and put in foster care. At trial, the judge finds that the entire sweep was based on the testimony of a single informant who lied to the prosecution. You, however, are still a drug felon, homeless, and desperate to regain custody of your children. This is the war on drugs. We may think we know how the criminal justice system works. Television is overloaded with fictional dramas about police, crime, and prosecutors. Shows such as Law and Order. That is the made-for-TV version of the criminal justice system. These television shows are the modern-day equivalent of the old movies portraying happy slaves. The fictional gloss placed on a brutal system of racialized oppression and control. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Selena Tang, and today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. This year, as we've had the time to carefully look around, listen, and think, we've begun to recognize that the impacts of racism are felt every day, whether or not we personally experience it. I hope this piece inspires us to further reflect on our belief in actions so that we can initiate the necessary change in both ourselves and our communities. As we reflect, it's important to remember that racism affects all BIPOC groups, including Asian Americans, who've witnessed a striking surge in hate crimes against them during the pandemic. We must treat racism as the multifaceted and systemic issue that it is in order to truly address it. But before any of that can be accomplished, we must first understand what it even means to be racist. Thus, without further ado, an excerpt from How to Be an Anti-Racist. How many of us would agree with this statement? Racist isn't a descriptive word. It's a pejorative word. It's the equivalent of saying, I don't like you. How many of us who despise the Trumps and white supremacists of the world share their self-definition of not racist? What's the problem with being not racist? It is a claim that signifies neutrality. I am not a racist, but neither am I aggressively against racism. There is no neutrality in the racism struggle. The opposite of racist isn't not racist, it is anti-racist. What's the difference? One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people as a racist, or locates the roots of problems in power and policies as an anti-racist. One either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist, or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe space of not racist. The claim of not racist neutrality is a mask for racism. This may seem harsh, but it's important at the outset that we apply one of the core principles of anti-racism, which is to return the word racist itself back to its proper usage. Racist is not a pejorative. It is not the worst word in the English language. It is not the equivalent of a slur. It is descriptive. And the only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it. The attempt to turn this usefully descriptive term into an almost unusable slur is of course designed to do the opposite, to freeze us into inaction. We know how to be racist. We know how to pretend to be not racist. Now, let's know how to be anti-racist. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex Chow. Never Let Me Go, a science fiction novel written by Kazuo Ishiguro in 2005, explores a dystopian society in which clones are raised for the sole purpose of harvesting their organs. In this excerpt of the novel, the narrator Kathy recollects the moment when she realizes others' internalized fear of donors like her. As she describes, the emotional impact of being a victim of implicit bias is traumatizing, and it alters her perception of herself and of the world around her. Similarly, for victims of prejudice today, including people of color, experiencing even subtle social injustices can still be extremely disheartening. And now, an excerpt from Never Let Me Go. Thinking back now, I can see we were just at that age when we knew a few things about ourselves, about who we were, how we were different from our guardians, from the people outside, but hadn't yet understood what any of it meant. I'm sure somewhere in your childhood, you too had an experience like ours that day. Similar, if not in the actual details, then inside, in the feelings. Because it doesn't really matter how well your guardians try to prepare you. All the talks, videos, discussions, warnings, none of that can really bring it home. Not when you're 8 years old, and you're all together in a place like Hailsham, when you've got guardians like the ones we had, when the gardeners and the delivery men joke and laugh with you and call you sweetheart. All the same, some of it must go in somewhere. It must go in because by the time a moment like that comes along, there's a part of you that's been waiting. Maybe from as early as when you're 5 or 6, there's been a whisper going at the back of your head saying, one day, maybe not so long from now, you'll get to know how it feels. So you're waiting, even if you don't quite know it, waiting for the moment when you realize that you really are different to them. That there are people out there like Madame who don't hate you or wish you any harm, but who nevertheless shudder at the very thought of you, of how you were brought into this world and why, and who dread the idea of your hand brushing against theirs. The first time you glimpse yourself through the eyes of a person like that, it's a cold moment. It's like walking past a mirror you've walked past every day of your life, and suddenly it shows you something else, something troubling and strange. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jack Trapanick, and today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Maya Angelou's 1993 inaugural poem, On the Pulse of Morning. This poem uses the basic elements of our land to remind us of our inalienable humanity and connection to nature, which ought to precede the arbitrary divisions of society, like nationality, that we impose on ourselves and use as grounds for war and hate. Angelou thus calls upon us to rise to the occasion of life and human progress. And now, on the pulse of morning. A rock, a river, a tree, hosts to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dried tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. Yet today, the rock cries out to us, clearly, forcefully, "Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long faced down in ignorance, your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. A river sings a beautiful song. It says, 'Come, rest here by my side. Each of you, a bordered nation, delicate but strangely made proud, your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast. Yet today, I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one. Lift up your eyes. You have a piercing need for this bright day, dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Graciela Berman Reinhardt. Today, Anthony Ray Hinton is 64 years old. But in 1985, when he was just 29, he was hauled from his hometown in Alabama and falsely identified as the murderer of 2 people in nearby Birmingham. Then he was sentenced to death. In Hinton's 2018 memoir, The Sun Does Shine, published only 4 years after he was finally released, he details the racist incarceration system that identified him as a black man and then assumed he was guilty, and describes the horrors of living on death row, alongside people who had committed atrocities but were human nonetheless. Now, an excerpt from Anthony Ray Hinton's The Sun Does Shine. There was a guy a little younger than I was in the cell below. I had never talked to him, but I knew his name was Michael Lindsay, and I knew he was the next to be executed. In the month leading up to his execution, he cried every day. He cried in the yard. He cried as the death squad practiced marching in front of his cell, and he cried as they went into the death chamber and turned on the generator to test Yellow Mama. The guards practiced their ritual for killing him, and then they would ask him how he was doing and did he need anything, as if they weren't rehearsing his murder. He was 28 years old when the death squad came for him in May of 1989. He had no visitors in the days and hours before his death. He was completely alone. Shortly before midnight, when we knew he was being strapped into that chair, we began to make some noise. Up and down the row, men began banging on the bars and doors of their cells. I heard some men yell, "Murderers!" to the guards. I made a fist and I slammed it against the door of my cell as loud and as long as I could until my hand was red and raw. I didn't know Michael Lindsay, but I wanted him to know that he wasn't alone. I wanted him to know that I saw him and knew him and his life meant something. And so did his death. I banged on the bars until the smell of Michael Lindsay's death reached me. And then I got in my bunk and I pulled the blanket over my head and I wept. I cried for a man who had to die alone, and I cried for whoever was next to die. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ruth Schifferau, and today I will be declaiming an abridged version of The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. Millions of people across America watched the first National Youth Poet Laureate as she amazed us with her inspirational words at this year's presidential inauguration on January 20th. Her poem does not stray from the inauguration's overarching theme of unison, and her percussive diction helps emphasize this insistence on peace, love, and hope, particularly in today's trying times. And now, The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet, the dawn was ours before we knew it. Yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Thank you.
Greetings, Class 1, Miss Scarrett, and esteemed alumni of Boston Latin School. My name is Juliana Zhao, and today I will be declaiming an excerpt from Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club. Published in 1989, the novel, and later the movie, was a major breakthrough in offering a realistic depiction of the Asian American experience. And it gave hope to many for future proper representation in our literature and on our screens. However, looking back more than 3 decades later, that optimism seems to have been in vain. And the recent outrage from the Asian American community comes from a group of people tired of being erased in the media, seen as a faceless doctor or lawyer, a sexualized other, and held up as the model minority based on a false narrative that Asians are aligned with whiteness. Today, we need to humanize the stories of countless first and second generation immigrants of Asian descent. An excerpt from the Joy Luck Club, Feathers from 1,000 Li Away. The old woman remembered a swan she had bought many years ago in Shanghai for a foolish sum. This bird, boasted the market vendor, was once a duck that stretched its neck in hopes of becoming a goose. And now look, it is too beautiful to eat. Then the woman and the swan sailed across an ocean many thousands of li wide, stretching their necks toward America. On her journey, she cooed to the swan, "In America, I will have a daughter just like me. But over there, nobody will say her worth is measured by the loudness of her husband's belch. Over there, nobody will look down on her, because I will make her speak only perfect American English. And over there, she will always be too full to swallow any sorrow. She will know my meaning, because I will give her this swan, a creature that became more than what was hoped for." But when she arrived in the new country, the immigration officials pulled her swan away from her, leaving the woman fluttering her arms and with one swan feather for a memory. And then she had to fill out so many forms. She forgot why she had come and what she had left behind. Now the woman was old. And she had a daughter who grew up speaking only English and who drank more Coca-Cola than sorrow. For a long time now, the woman had wanted to give her daughter the single swan feather and tell her, "This feather may look worthless, but it comes from afar and carries with it all my good intentions." And she waited, year after year, for the day she could tell her daughter this in perfect American English. Thank you.